Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talks on Tuesdays. My name is Naomi Grinney. I'm a licensed clinical social worker on staff with Infant Toddler Connection in Northern Virginia in Fairfax. I'm also an infant mental health specialist and a behavioral health senior clinician. And I'm really looking forward to being with you all today to talk about Ecomaps and kind of share some information that may be new for you. And I'm also really excited because I have Jessica Hale with me today. So I'll ask Jessica to also introduce herself and then we can get started.
Hi, everyone. Like Naomi said, I'm Jessica Hale. I am currently a service coordinator supervisor with the Infant Toddler Connection of Virginia Beach. And prior to stepping into this role, I was actually a developmental service provider for a number of years. I also went through the infant mental health endorsement, and Naomi is going to be taking the lead today, and then you'll hear a lot more from me in June.
Thanks to you both. And also in the background, I want to welcome Seth, who is providing tech support and has done a beautiful job with our PowerPoint. If you have any tech questions, feel free to put those in chat, and Seth will be happy to assist you any way along in the webinar. So with that, let's go ahead and get started.
All right. Well, we're really excited to be able to talk with you all today. We're going to start with our learning objectives. So family systems, Ecomaps, why does this even matter, right? We want to kind of start with talking about what is it that we're really going to be kind of diving into today. So today we're going to first start by understanding some family systems. We're going to talk about what family systems are and get a shared understanding of what those look like. We're also going to talk about what is an Ecomap. Why do we use this terminology? What does it mean when we talk about it? We're also going to give everyone an opportunity today to build your skills as an early interventionist. So we're hoping to add some tools to your early intervention toolbox and share some knowledge that we have about family systems, about Ecomaps, and how you can use this in the work that you do. And we're also going to be thinking about families in new ways. So, you know, one of the things that's so important for us as early interventionists is that we use the word family all the time, right? We talk about working with families and children. We talk about, family relationships. We talk about family-centered practices. And so we always want to be kind of thinking about families in new and different ways. And so we're going to have the opportunity to do that together today. So the first thing that I'll ask, and feel free to type your answers into chat, when you think about family, how do you define family? Who it comprises. So which people maybe are in the family. Families define themselves, Dana, yes. Who's included in the family? Adults partnering together to support each other and their children, people connected to each other. Those closest to you. Yeah, absolutely. These are some great ways that we think about family. So, and as you guys are kind of putting these answers in the chat, one thing that we kind of maybe historically or traditionally thought about families were, maybe the people that kind of lived in your house, right? So parents, children, maybe grandparents, maybe extended family members, right? And that definition has really kind of changed over some time. So now there's this idea that your family is kind of maybe includes those people, right? Parents and grandparents and children, but it also may extend beyond that to people that you choose as your family. So maybe you're not biologically related to them, but you choose to have them as a part of your life. And so family can kind of happen in multiple different ways. Families can be created, they can be chosen, they can be built over time. And our own family relationships can also inform the way that we feel about our own families and also about the families that we work with. So sometimes the kind of relationships maybe that we have within our own families, we find that those, we might see some similarities in families that we work with, or maybe there's some differences in families that we work with. Our ideas about how families are created might inform some of the work that we're doing. And so sometimes when we're using this word so often, it's important to kind of take a step back and really think about, what does that word family mean? What does that mean for us as early interventionists? And what does it also mean for the families that we're working with? Who are those people that are involved with the children that are in our programs? Who are the people that are invested in their lives? Maybe even daycare providers, right? Individuals that the children spend lots of time with. Friends that are helping to provide care or support to the family. Families are also very unique. And so even within the same family, there can be different traditions, there can be different experiences, there can be different belief systems. So it's really important to kind of think about all these different ways that families are defined, and also to understand everybody has those different perceptions about what family really means to them. So we'll think about this as we continue to talk today. So the first thing that we're going to kind of introduce, or maybe reintroduce for those of you that are familiar with this concept, is the idea of family systems theory. So this was a theory that was created by a psychiatrist named Dr. Bowen, and it's a theory of human behaviors that views the family as an emotional unit, and it helps to understand the interactions between family members. And so we have this picture of the crib mobile here because it's that balance between, the individual parts of the mobile, but also how all of those parts create balance or maybe imbalance, how they kind of work together when that mobile is turned on to move in a particular way. That maybe, the impact of if a piece of the mobile maybe moves or changes its positioning. And so family systems theory kind of operates with the idea that all parts of a family system are interconnected, and that the system is understood when you look at the whole. So when you see the entire family and not only the individual people that are in that family. So you're looking at what is the way that this entire unit functions. It's also a way of understanding that the family affects their environment. So the family impacts the environments that they're in. So the family impacts their community. The family impacts their daycare. The family impacts their play groups. And the family is also affected by or impacted by those individuals and those systems that they're a part of. So the family is affected by what happens in their community. The family is affected by what happens at their doctor's office. And so it's an interconnected way of looking at a family. And it also kind of helps to understand the way that a family organizes itself. So the priorities of the family, the way that the family might approach different situations, the way that a family might respond to something that happens. Family systems theory can help us to understand family behaviors, interactions, and communication styles. It can also help us to interact. When we understand more about the family, we're able to interact with the family in a way that is more comfortable, right? So we learn about the family, we learn kind of what's important to them and how they operate. And it also helps us to identify those individualized outcomes, right, that fit really well with a particular child and a particular family. And that's super important in early intervention work because we're creating individualized family services plans and we're creating individualized goals, right? We talk about this all the time in our system about, we can have kiddos that maybe come in with some similar challenges, but we really want to write a plan and we really want to create a support system for a family that's very unique to that particular family and to their particular needs. It can also help us when we understand family systems theory, it can help us to identify what services and supports might help to reduce stress for our family. So a support that is really beneficial for one family may not be as beneficial for another family because those two families are very unique. Those two families operate in very different ways. And it can also help us to increase the family's sense of competence and confidence in caring for their children and meeting their child's needs. And so it's really an important thing to understand, what is important to this family? How do they operate? What are some things that might be challenging for them? What are some things they're really excellent at doing, so that we can know how do we best support? And it also helps to build that family's connection to and comfort within the larger community system. So we know that when families feel confident, when they feel able to care for their children, when they feel like they're able to meet their children's needs and they have the resources and supports to be able to do so, they're more able to engage with their communities. And that's something that we hear often as early interventionists for families that we work with, that it's important for them to feel connected to their community, that it's important for them to feel as though they're a part of the environments that they live in and that they engage with. So these are some kind of background pieces that are helpful for us to think about. The other kind of important thing to think about with family systems theory is that it's really looking at a lot of the different connections that are happening within families. So we talked about that emotional piece, right? How do families understand the emotions of themselves, the other family members? How do they react to those emotions? What are the stories that they tell themselves about the emotions that are displayed by other members of their family? And then it's also looking at what are those physical connections? How do they interact when they're around each other? How do they spend their time together? How do they engage together? And then there's also kind of those physiological responses that happen within individuals and families. And what happens maybe when a family member is experiencing stress, right? So we talked about that crib mobile. If one family member is maybe experiencing a heightened period of stress, how does that impact all of the other family members? How does the impact of that stress kind of is experienced by the individual? So if you have an individual that's feeling very stressed, how does that impact their interactions with their family member? How does that impact their interactions with their child? And so we're really looking at kind of what's happening externally with a family, kind of what we can see in the interactions, in the ways that they communicate with one another, in the ways maybe their ideas or approaches to parenting. And then we're also looking at kind of what's happening internally with each individual member in that family. And we know that people react and respond to stress differently. People react and respond to information that they receive differently. And so understanding, when you're working with a family member, grandma really gets overwhelmed when she feels stressed out, and she processes stress in a different way. And what does that look like when she interacts with the child in the home? What does that look like when she's interacting with the parents that are in that home? And that's important to think about when we're also trying to understand how do we best provide supports and how do we help kiddos to meet their developmental milestones. Family systems theory also considers how generational, social, community, and cultural factors influence and impact individuals and families. So we often talk about, parents are parenting now in some of the same ways that they themselves were parented. Or maybe they're wanting to parent in very different ways than they themselves were raised. And that's important to know. What was a parent's experience like being parented? What was the grandparents' experience of raising that child? Because that is helping us to understand what are those beliefs that the family has? What are those values that they have? What's important for them? And what has happened over generations? What's been that family story? What happens kind of socially? Sometimes when we think about social impact, we think about social media and its impact, and that might be one impact, but it's also those social relationships, the face-to-face relationships that we have with one another and the impact that that has. And it also is looking at, those cultural or community impacts on a family. So what are some of their cultural beliefs? What are some of the ways in which they're engaged in their community? And how does that affect and impact the way that the family functions. Families serve as a building block for other emotional connections. So the family kind of unit and how they connect with each other impacts the way that they make those connections with other people. And so you might think about it like, two parents and a child is kind of like a little triangle. And that triangle serves as the base for other emotional and other social relationships. There's also processes that families go through, right? When we talk about child development and kind of the process of developing and all the different things that happen in development, all of those different things are also happening within a family. So if a sibling is born into a family, that changes the family dynamic. If, a parent maybe is at home with the child and then they go back to work or they enter the workforce. When a child starts to kind of differentiate a little bit and separate themselves from their parents, all of those different kind of things that we go through naturally in our development impact the way that families function and exist together. And it also impacts the way that we as early interventionists kind of interact with those families. Okay, so our next question, kind of now that we've talked a little bit about family systems and maybe shared some things about the ways in which families function or operate, has any of the information that you just learned caused you to think, this might change the way that I approach families, or this might change a little bit the way that I interact with families that I work with? Lauren, with how you interact, important to see how families kind of view, how you view the family, but how the family views themselves and their roles. It helps us understand the why of some of the things families might do. Exactly. These are great points. As someone with a background, it jumped right as I was about to read it. As someone with a background in social work, I believe this information needs to be the core of every interventionist. Yeah, kind of just understanding what's happening within that family unit so that as we're working with that child, we're really coming in with that understanding of the family as a whole. Absolutely. Really focuses on individualizing families. So really looking at how we're thinking about families as very, very unique systems. Family system is also critical to understanding coaching, right? Understanding how different family members learn. That's a great point. How they receive information, how they're able to process what's being shared with them. Understanding the cultural differences, absolutely, in order to understand really, how that family might interact or the things that are really important for them. We'll be able to make more of an impact if we know this information about our families, right? And that's the challenge sometimes with early intervention work, is we may not know all of the different pieces of the family when an individual is first coming to us, right? When we are first meeting the child, we may not know about all of this history. And so as we grow in our relationship with that family, as we develop that relationship over time, and we're able to learn this information, right? We're building that trusting relationship. Hopefully that family feels comfortable to share that information, and that's able to help further inform our work. Absolutely, these are great answers. So what we're going to do, and you can feel free to keep typing into the chat as we go through this. What we're going to do is talk to you a little bit now about Ecomap. So, knowing information about the family, and we talk about the things too, body language, some of that nonverbal communication. We're getting clues about the family all the time. What's important to them, their kind of facial expression might say one thing, and maybe their body language says something else. And so we're picking up on all of these clues about families, and we're kind of learning, we're listening, and we're tuning into, that sounds like it's something that's really important. Or, Dad has mentioned that several times. I'm wondering how I might be able to follow back with him on that question. And so we're using kind of all of our skills as early interventionists to really learn about families. And now we're going to kind of talk about how we can use this information in really meaningful ways. So we will start first by talking about what even is an Ecomap. We've maybe heard that word before, or we're wondering about what it is. So an Ecomap is a tool that was developed by Ann Hartman in 1975. And what it does is it looks at kind of the ecological system that encompasses a family. So you're seeing on this page, right, we've got the family is right in the middle. And then there are all of these different pieces around the family. There's, a doctor's office. There's maybe a daycare or social environment. There's maybe a community playground that the family goes to on a regular basis. There's maybe, a parent employment office on here. So there's all of these different things that we know kind of are a part of the family's life. The great thing about the Ecomap is that it is a strength-based and person-centered perspective. And so that is kind of the core of what we do as early interventionists, right? We're strength-based. And so we're looking at what do these relationships between family members look like? What does the interaction between the family and their community look like? Who are all of the different people that are involved in the family story? And it also provides this person-centered perspective, right? Because right in the center of that Ecomap is the family. And if you were to break it down even further, right in the very, very center, we would put the child, because the child is the person that we are really supporting. And so we've got the child kind of right in that very, very center. Their family is right around them. And then they have all of these different systems and communities in which they interact. And so the great thing that, another great thing about Ecomaps is that it's kind of this geographical representation, and it shows all of the different systems at play in an individual's life. Sometimes when we are talking with a family, or we're getting information about a family, we might just be thinking about, say, a family and, their pediatrician. And we're thinking, oh, what information is the family getting from their pediatrician? What feedback are they getting from their pediatrician? And that's kind of what's in our minds. And really, it's not only the family and the pediatrician, but it's also all of these other places and spaces that the family exists. And so this, an Ecomap can really be a wonderful visual way that we see all of these different connections that the family has to the world around them, to the systems that they're a part of, to the people who are an important part of their lives. And it also can be a really useful tool to help us to assess the family. So, one of the things that we'll talk about with an Ecomap is, it's looking at the types of relationships, right? So we can hear, oh, I went to see the pediatrician last week. And maybe what we don't know is, I don't really like the pediatrician. The information that they give me is super frustrating every time I go, right? And so by putting all of this information in the Ecomap, it helps us to know, maybe I should follow up with a question about, I'm wondering how you're feeling about that appointment, right? That could inform maybe some of the questions that we're asking, or some of the responses that we're giving when we understand the complexities of some of those relationships. It also helps us to understand some of those social and community relationships and the quality of the connections that families have. So when a family might say, oh, we spend every week at the playground. What does that look like? How are you feeling about that time that you're spending? Are you able to make maybe social connections? Would you like to? What does that look like for your family? And so by having kind of this visual in front of us or available to us, it really helps us to be able to think about and interact with a family in a different way. So what we're going to do now is we are going to kind of ask some questions, and then we're going to share with you a vignette, and we're going to talk about how we might complete this Ecomap. So when you're thinking about kind of ways that you get information from families, what are some ways that we gather information from families that we work with? We observe and ask questions. Absolutely. Conversations. We ask questions. Yeah. Caregiver reports, medical records, looking at their environment, questionnaires, intakes. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that even just in these quick answers that are coming in, one thing that body language, exactly. One thing that I'm kind of struck by is that we gather information about families in multiple different ways, right? So we have kind of the information that the family shares with us. We also might get some medical information. So, that might share things about the family that they didn't know that were important to share with us, right? Like I had a mom that was telling me once, she goes, I never really would have thought to talk to you about how she was born. I mean, I know it, but I never really thought about sharing that. But I guess, yeah, that would be important to know, right? So, and no one had ever really asked her that before. And so, she was kind of realizing, oh, I'm going to share information in a different way now. So we can ask questions, we can watch their body language, we can see the way that they're interacting and communicating with one another. We can also use screening tools and assessment tools that we have available to us, right? So we might ask a family, let's talk about some of your routines. And that might be a way that we get information. And then we might ask more specifically, how does Susie get around? When you're talking to me about the things that y'all are doing at home, how is she getting from place to place, right? And so that's giving us even more information. And we can also do some observing, right, over time. So not only are we asking those questions, but we're observing, what is their environment like? How are they getting around their environments? How are they engaging with other maybe people, with their communities? So there are a lot of different ways that we're getting information. And that's so important for us to remember that we can obtain this information in many different ways. Okay, so our next question is, once you have kind of gathered this information, how do you then use that information to help you understand what a family might need, what their priorities are? You can ask them, absolutely. Has anyone ever asked a family, oh, what do you think you'd really, when you're thinking about your child's development, what's something you would really like to see happen? And the family says, I don't know. That's what I want you to tell me, right? Sometimes that happens when we will say, oh, we're thinking about some goals that we'd like to write, and we'd love to hear from you. What are some of the things that you'd like to see happen? I don't know. I'm not really sure, right? So sometimes asking those questions or even sharing some information, sometimes it's helpful to know what's even supposed to come next, right? Like, I think I want them to be walking, but I'm not really sure how to get them there, right? So we could talk through, oh, okay, well, let's think about what are some ways that we would help to support that goal of walking. Yeah, we can talk about routines and kind of what are the routines? What are the things that you're doing within the family? Verify information. Yes, absolutely. This is what I have heard up until now, or this is the information that was shared with me. Is that accurate? Is that correct information, right? Even in this digital age where we have so much that's written down and so much that we can kind of access maybe in an online record, information can get misinterpreted, misunderstood all the time, right? It's like that game of telephone. It can happen when you've got multiple people that are sharing the information where we might not have the most accurate amount of what we need to know about a family. Oh, I love this. Sit and process the information. How important is that, right? We go family visit, office, family visit, another family visit, right? And sometimes it can feel like, oh my gosh, I learned so many things just in one day. What day is it? What did I learn? How do I need to make sure I remember all this information? Sitting and processing the information ourselves so that we're able to be really clear. Okay, that was information about this particular family. This is important for me to remember. Such a great point. Absolutely. Helping to guide sessions and strategies, right? So if we know what information is kind of important for the family, that helps us to know, maybe we should ask some follow-up questions. Maybe we want to share some more information in our next visit. Maybe there are some resources that we could help get connected to the family. We could also use this information for outcome development. So, sometimes the family will say, my biggest concern is, they're not making a whole lot of sounds. Okay, I'm hearing you say you'd really like it if you could know what they want to eat. Oh yeah, that would be really important, right? So we can think about, okay, now I know this information and it can help to inform the work that we do with families. Absolutely. Okay. Verifying information. Oh, Jessica, yeah, really like the mention of processing information and taking time to sit with it. It can. Sometimes we get information and we feel like, okay, now I know this, I got to respond. I got to do something with this information, right? I got to take it and follow up, or I've got to make a plan, or I've got to, get back in touch with this family. And sometimes it can also be for us, I've gotten so much information today. Let me kind of allow that to just sit for a little bit so I can really maybe not rush into making a decision or having a response. And sometimes we can even communicate that with families. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. That was so impactful that you were able to do that. I really appreciate knowing that part of your story, right? And even kind of having families be okay with and helping them to be able to sit with information that's shared. That can be really powerful, absolutely. And we can kind of understand how maybe could we sit with this information when we're developing our Ecomap, right? We can also we can gain knowledge about the family over time, and then we can remember even more information when we're putting together this Ecomap, absolutely. Corey, that's a great point. We sometimes get so caught up in timelines and deadlines that it can be easy to forget information that's shared with us or things that a family really wants us to kind of take the time to know. And, we talk all the time about how unique it is in early intervention that we're going into people's homes, right? We get a really different kind of insight, picture into people's lives when we're inside of that space that's, very valuable to them. And that's something that you might not get if you saw a family in a community setting, or that you might not get if you ran into a family at a grocery store, right? And so really seeing that part of a family's life, and for families, that they're allowing you to be in their home and a part of kind of the things that they're doing together as a family. Okay, this is such great. I love this feedback, and I'm really gonna, I think, continue to emphasize this idea of kind of being quiet and sitting with information that we get, because that's something that's really can be difficult to do when we're go all the time. Okay, we sometimes can rush through IFSP meetings, right? I don't know how everyone else does it in their systems, but in Fairfax, we do the ASP and we develop the IFSP in the same meeting. And that's a long, I get overwhelmed, and I'm an adult in those meetings, right? And so I can very much appreciate the 1-year-old, the 7-month-old that says, I'm done with this. So sometimes we kind of we're getting so much information. We have so much we have to do, right? In an IFSP meeting. Okay, we have to get all this information. We got to go through the background. We got to talk about your priorities. We got to do a write-up. There's so much that we're doing. Oh, thank you, Corey, for those not from Virginia. Assessment for service planning. I forget, not everyone is familiar with our acronyms. So getting all of that information in one meeting can feel really overwhelming. It can feel like, oh my gosh, we have to do so much. And so even just slowing down when we're in those meetings and saying, I'm going to take a minute, or you know what, I'm going to note this and come back to it a little bit later, so it doesn't quite feel like we're being so rushed. And I think sometimes when we kind of exude that to the families, right? Like families come in sometimes and they really want to share all of the information with us. And it can feel overwhelming for them because they're like, what if I forget to tell you something? Or, oh, I forgot, I wanted to share this as well. And so giving them that opportunity and that space to just say, this is okay. We can take those moments to, think about or to reflect on some of that information that was shared. Absolutely. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to introduce you guys to Cassie. And what I'd like for you to do, I'm going to read through this vignette. I know it's a lot of text on the screen, but I'm going to read through this vignette. And as I'm reading through, what I'd like for you to do is think about that Ecomap that we showed you a couple of slides ago, and just jot down, if you were kind of creating an Ecomap about Cassie and her family, what are some things that you might include? What are some things that you might think would be important to remember for yourself? What are some things maybe you want to follow back with or come back to? So we're going to read through this vignette, and then we're going to kind of talk about how will we start creating this Ecomap for Cassie and her family. So Cassie is our little friend sitting on top of mom's shoulders over here. She's a 12-month-old. She lives at home with her mom and her dad and her older brother. Cassie was born with a congenital heart defect, and she's followed by a cardiologist. She also attends an in-home daycare. So her mom and dad are working, and her brother is also at the daycare with her. And there are 3 teachers and 10 kids total. And they're kiddos that are infants all the way up to 4-year-olds. Cassie's maternal grandparents live close by. Mom's relationship with her parents is a little bit strained. And so they don't really visit very often. It's kind of here and there. Paternal grandparents live across the country, and they FaceTime weekly with Cassie and her brother. The family also attends church every week, and Cassie and her brother take part in a play group together twice a month, while mom is volunteering for different church activities. When we were talking about when mom was sharing with us about Cassie's development, she said that she's not quite sure if she should be concerned with Cassie's temperament. Mom noticed that her temperament is a little bit different from her brother's. Mom feels like Cassie gets a little bit more panicked when people approach her, or when she's kind of in situations where she might interact with new people. Mom said that also Cassie can be difficult to engage with. Cassie gets easily frustrated. When she's playing, mom notices that it's harder for her to kind of sit with one activity or keep trying. Puzzles, for example, it can be more challenging for her. She is really content to be held, but she also can play on the floor and kind of with her toys for long periods of time. Sometimes she'll want to interact with her brother, but often she's pretty content to just play on her own. And she'll make wonderful eye contact, but it's kind of on her terms. So it's, when she's not distracted, or, maybe she'll look up from her play for a minute, but then she wants to go right back to what she's playing with. Mom also described that Cassie is more quiet. So, Cassie's older brother, when he's playing with his trucks and with his cars, he'll be making lots of sounds. So he'll say, wee, oh no, let's go. She's been hearing him say that, pretty consistently. And with Cassie, she can spend a lot of the day not really making a lot of noise. Cassie does have a lot of people in her house that are able to meet her needs. Her parents are very responsive with her, but she's not really using those playful sounds. She doesn't say vroom or beep, beep. She doesn't really kind of try and access mom's attention so much. She'll, if she wants something, she'll get up and maybe go toward the pantry, or she'll walk into the kitchen, or maybe she'll, point toward the stairs. But she doesn't really make a lot of sounds. Cassie is also showing some preferences for particular toys like books and puzzles and her play kitchen set. She likes to mostly play with her family members or those people that are familiar, so her friends at daycare that she knows well. To give her more social opportunities, Cassie's parents have been taking her and her brother to the local playground. But Cassie's heart condition does impact her energy levels, so she's able to play for a little while, but she's not able to stay at the playground for long periods of time. So these are some of the things that we know about Cassie. So something else that kind of we think about when we're looking at this Ecomap. So when you're thinking about the Ecomap and you've got Cassie and her family kind of right there in the middle, what are some kind of ways that you might fill in, or things that you think, this would be important for us to remember about Cassie and her family, or this is a follow-up question that I might have about Cassie. these are some things that we're going to kind of continue to talk about. And we're really going to delve into, how do we fill out this Ecomap? What do all these different lines and arrows, what do those mean? We're going to talk so much about that in part 2. But one thing I just kind of wanted to show you was this, this idea of kind of in conjunction with family systems and, oops, my slide just jumped ahead there. I jumped back for just a second. Understanding family systems and understanding the Ecomap is this idea of an ecological system. So this was something that was developed by Bronfenbrenner, who's a behavior theorist. And an ecological system, kind of when we think about ecology, sometimes we're thinking about like what's happening in nature, right? Like what's the ecological system, in my neighborhood. But really this is looking at what is the ecological system of a family. And so kind of in that really dark purple circle in the middle, we're looking at that family, kind of that unit of who is comprised of the immediate family. When you kind of pan out just a little bit, that next purple circle, that's looking a little bit at those, next kind of extended family members, maybe close friends, right? That the family engages with, that they interact with, that they talk to. That they're in, they've got relationships with. And then you kind of expand your circle out even more. And you look at, okay, who are those other people that the family has pretty regular contact with? Maybe, a faith-based environment that the family is involved with. Maybe the medical community, right? Different medical providers. Maybe a school or a daycare center. Maybe there's other, friends that we see at the playground somewhat consistently. And then we start going into those green circles and we're thinking about, okay, what is that maybe neighborhood, right? What's going on maybe in the larger community? And then even kind of the furthest circle out, we're thinking about, okay, what is the community that the family is a part of, right? What do maybe that the family isn't kind of directly connected with, but where are they kind of existing in that large community? And so kind of thinking about it in this way can also help to inform, what do we know about those different relationships? What might be some of the different priorities of the family as they are engaging or getting connected? And so we can kind of think about these different systems that the families are a part of and the relationships between systems and the importance of different relationships, right? So the relationship that you might have with an extended family member versus the relationship that you might have with a medical provider, what those might look like and the importance of those relationships and how they might also change over time. So the ecological system is just another way to kind of understand families or another visual that can be helpful when we think about, what is kind of impacting that family unit, right? Because all of these systems, all of these circles are impacting that really core family unit. Okay, so then this is kind of your opportunity on our next slide to do a little practicing. So, and to kind of ask this question. So if you're thinking about Cassie kind of in the middle of this circle, what might be some of the kind of pieces? What are some of the ways that you would fill in these different circles? If you were kind of making an Ecomap of Cassie's family, what are some of the things that you put in these circles around her family? Yeah, her in-home daycare. Absolutely, that would be an important component. And that would include, a couple of different relationships, right? In the daycare setting, that would include her relationships with her teachers and also her relationships with her peers. And that can look really different. What does she need from each of those individuals? What do those relationships look like? Yeah, her church family, absolutely. Mom is kind of volunteering at the church. So, what do those kind of, how well do they maybe know other people that are there? What is that play group that Cassie and her brother are a part of? What does that look like? Absolutely. Yeah, some of those maybe broken or fractured relationships with the grandparents. As a mental health provider, I would be curious. Just my own self, has the relationship always been challenging? Has it always been impacted in this way? What might that be looking like? Has that been a recent change? How's that impacting Cassie? How does it impact mom? How does that impact dad and brother? Grandparents, absolutely. What is that information looking like that mom's getting from the grandparents, right? What is that feedback looking like? Absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts about who you might put into those circles? Yeah, the community, going to the park. Exactly, Corey. So maybe it would be, maybe they don't see the same people at the park every time, but maybe they do. Maybe there are some people that they see, or even just kind of identifying with, hey, this is kind of our place that we go in the community. And what does that look like? And thinking about some of those feelings too and emotions that being at the park might bring up. Oftentimes what I'll hear from parents is it can be challenging for them, to engage in settings where they see other kids, because it reminds them that their child might be developing in a different way, or they're not quite sure how to support their child in a setting where, their child might need to move in a particular way. And so kind of there's the physical, playground, but then there's also the emotions that it brings up for parents. I've had parents that have told me, that they don't really want to go out into the community because it's challenging for them. They're not sure how to respond. They're not sure how to manage maybe when they strike up a conversation with someone, or maybe if their child has a difficult time while they're out in a social setting, that they just kind of avoid them altogether. So that can be important to think about as well. Yes, Debbie and Joanne, we talked about those medical providers. How many times have we, I think, again, because we hear that, right? We know, I would say most of the kids that are in our programs are connected with, a pediatrician, probably a dentist, right? And, we hear about that so often, the pediatrician appointments, or, they went to, see the dentist the other day. What does that really look like? How do parents feel about that? What's the communication with their pediatrician? Sometimes we're asking questions. I know this happens to me, and we'll be asking questions when we're at the assessment, and the family will say, no, nobody's ever asked me that before. Okay. So it's different, right? If that's a brand new question that you're being asked versus, oh yeah, my pediatrician's brought this up with me before. Yeah, we've talked about it, right? What's the communication like with your medical professionals and providers? And for Cassie, she's got kind of an even more expanded medical team, right? Because she's got that cardiologist that's involved with her. So, I was thinking about with Cassie, when was that heart condition recognized? Was that something that happened in utero? Was mom followed differently by, her medical team before she gave birth to Cassie? What was the response once Cassie was born? Was there an immediate intervention that was needed? What's the follow-up looking like? Is she seen kind of once a year? Is she having to be seen once a week? What does that look like? And what is kind of impact is that having also on the family? How does the family feel that they're able to kind of respond to those medical appointments? Sometimes it can feel overwhelming when you're getting all of that information. Maybe there's going to have to be a decision that's made, from a medical perspective. And that can maybe feel challenging to know what to do. Absolutely. The place of worship, right? So how is that family kind of connected to their place of worship? What's their engagement? What is, do they feel kind of accepted and welcomed and encouraged and engaged? Is that relationship more challenging for them? What are those other settings, right? We've talked about a few of those settings. We talked about daycare. We talked about, some of the medical pieces. We talked about, the playground, but where else? Where else is this family engaging? Where else are they connected to? What does that look like? Kind of those connections with, their community. And these are all kind of great things to think about. And so, this is really when we're looking at this Ecomap, kind of this first part is we're getting this information, right? So we're kind of learning a little bit more about Cassie. We kind of start with her, right? We learn a lot about Cassie just kind of by the nature of our program. So she's the one that's coming in to receive support and services. And so we kind of learn a lot about her. And as we go, we're also starting to learn about her family. You know, even though Cassie's brother is kind of in this picture with her and her dad as well, I kind of wonder, what do those relationships with her other family members look like, right? What do Cassie's relationships with her mom and her dad and her brother look like? How are mom and dad feeling about Cassie's development? What does that look like? How does that inform the way that they choose to engage with their community? So we're thinking about kind of Cassie, we're learning this information, and then we're also starting to kind of fill in some of these pieces. What does it look like for Cassie to kind of develop in these different communities? What does it look like for her family to access supports? How are they impacted by maybe some of those relationships that feel more fractured or more strained? What are the ways that mom and dad get supports, right? Individually and together. So these are kind of, you know, sometimes when we're getting information, it almost is like, now we have more questions than answers, right? Like, I've learned this and now I want to know more things, or I have more questions. But it's a great way to kind of start. And again, having it in a visual, because it's something that builds over time, right? So it's not often that we're able to kind of get information about a family and be like, all right, I made the Ecomap, one day, done, right? It's something that we build over time, but by having that visual, it's something that allows us to come back to that visual and say, okay, this is what I really understand about Cassie's family, or this is what I'm really remembering about the things that I've learned. The other piece of this is, you know, when we're often in Fairfax, we talk about how we operate as a team, right? So I might be the provider that's going in with the family, but we're a whole team. We've got our service coordinators, we've got our OTs and our PTs and our developmental specialists. And we have, you know, so many people that are a part of our teams. And so sometimes when we're working together, right, if I'm going in to see a family and they're also being followed by an SLP and an OT, we might all be getting different information, right? We might all be hearing different things. And so sometimes having a little bit of that shared understanding, oh, that's what I remember hearing and what I remember as being really important. And so kind of thinking about, this is why we want to know all of this different information, because it's really helping us to kind of build that story of Cassie's family, but it's also helping our relationship to develop with her family as well. Okay. So thank you guys for joining us for this first part of Talks on Tuesday. And I hope that you will keep these notes close to you and kind of keep reflecting on Cassie in these next couple of weeks, because when we come back for part 2, what we're going to do is we're really going to talk about, how do we develop this Ecomap? What are all these different lines and symbols that we're putting between these family relationships? We're going to learn more about Cassie and her story and her family. And we do have some resources available. So feel free to kind of read through those, reflect on them in the next month. And we are so excited and we'll hope that you join us for part 2 of Talks on Tuesdays coming in early June.
Thank you so much, Naomi. We do have a few minutes. If you have any questions for Naomi or Jessica, please feel free to put them in chat. As Naomi mentioned, we do have the resource document available with lots of things that you all can check out. That was sent to you in your login information. And we will see, perhaps Seth could drop that link in chat too. But lots of good stuff for you to check out. As a reminder, after the call today, you will get a link in your email, and it contains a very short survey, which is an evaluation survey. Upon completing that, you will get a certificate for participating in our Talks on Tuesday. So again, Naomi, if you can flip to the next slide.
Yep, absolutely.
That'd be great. So again, we just want to remind you that the part 2 is June 7th, and we'll be continue to learning about Cassie and giving you the tools to really start using eco-mapping as a process in your work. So thank you for joining, and we will see you in June. Thanks, everybody.